Well, hi everybody. My name's Gerald Martin. I go by Jerry. I'm a graduate of Longwood University, and I'm a current systems administrator at the Fralin Biomedical Research Institute at Virginia Tech. I have been in the IT field since I was very young. I got my first computer in 1988 at the age of 5. It was a Tandy 1000 HX, and I've just been growing ever since to here. I've had a great interest in gaming for, again, a very long time. And one of the things that I've gotten to do over the years is work with several game developers. I'm actually in the progress of creating a game, not a cybersecurity based one, but a game for an author. And I've explored the topic of gamification or gamification, however you want to pronounce it, before. And so that's why I decided to present this talk. Being that originally at Longwood, I was going for teaching. I was a double major that had to drop it a little bit. Teaching was something that I was really interested in, and figuring out a way to take gaming and integrating it into education was something that I really have enjoyed working with. I've got some things I've helped with various friends over the years, and some new tools that I found recently that I thought might be of interest to some of the educators that are here. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, this topic is using gaming to reinforce cybersecurity concepts. When I'm talking about gaming, in this case, I'm referring to gamification, not just using actual games, but taking game mechanics and applying them to other things that don't necessarily have a gaming component to them. The paper that I was reading over to kind of give me this idea by Huatari and Hamari, they were using the original definition of gamification, which was taking game mechanics and applying them to web properties to increase engagement. So the idea is if you could do something on your website to convince people to stay, to give them a sense of involvement, then they're more apt to stay in and continue doing something on your website as opposed to clicking away, which of course means you don't get any money. Well, what we have since learned, you can apply that idea to more than just website engagement. And in fact, people are doing it every day without even realizing it. So for instance, how often have you used the phrase, treat it like a game and you'll enjoy it more? I know that I've had that spoken to me by my parents. I've heard teachers saying that to younger students. I mean, any kind of job that you can do, if you treat it more like a game, you will probably do more with it, because all of a sudden the idea of the drudgery and monotony of work is replaced with something that's, in your mind, fun. So what you can do to kind of expand that a little bit is not only give them a sense of playing something instead of doing something, but if you tie a reward to it as well. For instance, let's say somebody, I'm going to use Huck Finn as an example. If Huck Finn is painting that picket fence and his aunt comes to him and says, look, why don't you pretend that you're not just painting a fence, but that you're painting a battleship? And you need to make sure that you're doing the strokes in such a way that a cannon could come out of here. All of a sudden, Huck Finn's more like, oh, wait, that's cool. I hadn't thought about it that way. I can make it like I can pretend I'm doing a battleship. And then if the aunt comes back and says, you've been doing such a great job, I tell you what, if you finish it by 3 o'clock today, I'll give you some candy. If you finish it by 2 o'clock, I'll give you some candy and a penny to go spend at the country store. If you finish it at 4 o'clock, you'll get half the candy. So it kind of using the idea of the carrot, not even the stick, just the carrot, because there's still some reward to it. You can convince people to do things that they normally would not do so enthusiastically. And so that's one of the big things with gamification. You want to take whatever task it is and turn it into something that can be considered fun, engaging, and in some cases have a little bit of competition to it. We all know that if you put a little bit of competition in something, oftentimes you'll end up with more than just a standard result. I mean, we know with the idea of capitalism, two businesses competing often end up producing better results over time because they have a reason to get better over time. So adding in a little competition is not a bad thing. So what are the benefits of gamifying a task? Well, you can make in the way I'm talking about it here, which is in an educational context, you can make a subject or topic more approachable by students by turning it again more into a game and not just a lecture. For instance, there are some students, and I'm sure you all know this, that don't learn by listening. Some learn by doing. Some learn by watching someone else do it. Others learn by reading it. Others learn by writing it down as they're being taught. So what you're doing when you gamify it, you can actually integrate more than one teaching methodology into the game. So for instance, you could have both, say, a visual and a writing element in the presentation or in the topic that you couldn't before when you were just lecturing to the students. You can also increase the social aptitude of students, especially any that are at a high risk, perhaps some that are maybe unable to interact with schoolmates in a way that is enjoyable for both. By kind of creating this game, you can set up a small world where now the student understands the idea of the world that they're in. They have the rules, the boundaries, and they have a task to complete. And that sense of accomplishment can mean a whole lot, especially when it then ties back into them interacting more and learning more from and with their classmates. If you have somebody who's nonverbal or that just does not speak often, by doing the concept of a game like, say, Jeopardy, you could then bring the student out verbally by convincing them that to do so, they'll be rewarded for it and it will be fun. The element of fun kind of, every teacher I know of will admit this, honestly. Lectures are boring as a rule. I don't care what you're lecturing on. You could be lecturing on how to fire a giant howitzer off a battleship. That's not going to be fun if all you're doing is just talking at the student. Now, great teachers learn to talk with the students, but even then, it's still, it's a lecture. And unfortunately, not everybody is suited to giving the kind of lectures that are the most effective. And that's not knocking anyone. Some people are great public speakers, others aren't. So by creating a different way, it can actually benefit you as the educator by turning it into a game, because now you're focusing on it as a game concept and not just on another assignment. And again, it kind of gives the student a little bit of motivation, a little bit of wanting to complete the assignment. Because now, you know, maybe the kid who's, say, we know bullying is not tolerated, but let's say there's a kid who's picked on or teased a lot. All of a sudden, he could be the winner of this game, and suddenly his social stature rises, and so does his self-esteem. I mean, it can be doing the games properly can really bring a student out of their shell. I'm someone that enjoys doing games, and I also enjoy lectures too. I listen, I learn audibly, visually, with writing. There's very few ways that does not teach me well. But I know that if I'm doing something that's more engaging and not just listening, I will learn better. Now, you can have different games for the same topic. So one thing that you run into when you are working with students, especially if you're in a high school and you're doing periods, one period could spoil the game for the next period. Maybe not intentionally, but let's say you have a class before lunch and a class after lunch. Well, during lunch, some of the students may suddenly accidentally spill the beans about the game, which can then reduce some of the desire to do it. I mean, we know that when you tell somebody about something of spoiling, such as like movie spoilers and the like, people are less likely to then engage in the material. So if you create different games for the same topic, you could have multiple games per periods to then prevent that from happening and keep all the students engaged. It also is a way of basically beta testing the different games that you've created. For instance, you could use the same games year after year as long as you, I'm using a computer gaming concept, but as long as you upgrade them, change them up a little bit over the years, you could continue to use the same games for a while, constantly improving them. Adding in some of that mild competition like I spoke on a minute ago really can encourage students to become more engaged. They will probably talk more with their, if it's a team-based game, they'll be talking more with their team because they want to beat the other teams. Now, of course, you want to keep the competition healthy. You don't suddenly want to have it be a negative form of competition, which unfortunately can happen. But as long as you can keep the level of competition at a decent height, it actually would work better for you than not. One way that you can kind of keep from over exaggerating the competition is to make the reward not extravagant. For instance, if you offer, like, let's say you offer a class, you'll get an A on your next assignment automatically. That's great. That's awesome. Problem is, if you're then saying that nobody else in the room, none of the other teams, can get an automatic A on their next assignment, that could bring the competitiveness, especially if you've got students that aren't doing well, to a much higher level than is really good for the classroom environment. But the cool thing is too, by being able to upgrade your games and test them over a year or so, you can actually then pick and choose and even add in new cybersecurity concepts. And this applies not just to cybersecurity, this is any kind of education. But in this context, let's say NIST recently changed the password complexity guidelines. They said originally it should be, minimum of 8 characters up to 16, uppercase character, lowercase character, number, symbol. Okay, so one year you're teaching, let's say, NIST guidelines using a game I'm going to talk about in the next slide. But you're talking about that topic. Well, the NIST has changed it. So then the next year you can upgrade your game so that now you're talking about how to create a very long passphrase that is just as effective and following within the NIST guidelines. So the games don't have to be static. And if there are changes in the topic matter, if you've built your game robust enough, then you can slot in new topics without there being too much of an issue. And don't be discouraged if a game doesn't work with a particular class. Again, not everybody learns the same way, and some people may not do as well with that particular game than they would with a different type. It's a great way to experiment and just kind of find what your students may be interested in. So talking from a cybersecurity standpoint, though, I've got some examples of various games that could be used to gamify a cybersecurity concept. For instance, I don't know how many of you out there remember the old Mastermind game, but that was a game where you had to guess within a certain amount of time the pegs or colored pegs or lights, depending on the version you were playing, of what the computer or the OPFOR, the opposing force, had created as their code. So a lot of them, the beginner versions had usually 4 pegs, and what you had to do was determine the order of the pegs. First, you had to determine the colors. Depending on how advanced you were going, you may need to determine the correct colors used, then the position of the colors. Well, I mean, doing that over a period of time, that's basically brute forcing a password. You're figuring out, using a process of elimination or comparison, how to break someone else's password. At the same time, if you do it correctly, you can also show them the benefits of using a highly secure one, or how more effective it could be to use a more thorough password. You could have social engineering be taught by using a form of 20 questions, and you would probably want to assign something to one student and then have the various people quizzing them using the 20 questions to see if they can figure out what the item is that the person is either talking about or holding. And you can go more in depth. It doesn't have to be just yes or no questions in that instance. If you were saying you give a student a slip of paper that says Susie's birthday is 10/15/2001. They could then start trying to figure out Susie's birthday. First, they got to figure out who it is. Then they need to figure out Susie or Susie's birthday. And so there are ways, again, of making it more or less complex, but that's social engineering in a nutshell, asking questions and trying to get the students to guess it based on the clues given by the questions. You can also even use some of those Facebook surveys that keep coming around going, what's your favorite pet? What's the name of your first pet? If you don't already, don't fill those out. That is literally information harvesting in a way that is gamified so people don't realize that they're giving away their own personal information. So then you've also got maybe a capture the flag session where you have to maneuver around a classroom to try to manage the, to find the enemy flag. Maybe it's hidden around the classroom and you have to figure out how to get to it with certain protections in place, that like moving a desk, or maybe they have to tell another student or the teacher a certain password to get through. And that's a way that you can kind of build a capture the flag scenario, either student group against student group or everybody against the teacher. And final one, this is one I always enjoyed, creating your own cipher and then having somebody else try to crack it. Now, obviously there has to be some guidelines set down for the cipher creation. Otherwise, it truly would probably be not guessable, at least not within a reasonable amount of time by the students. But that's again, these are just 4 easy ways right off the bat to teach 4 basic cybersecurity concepts. And they're ones that can be, I mean, anything like that can be modified as it, or gamified to demonstrate topics like this. Now, there are some games that are already out there that you could also use in your classroom as additions to your lecture. I would not use them in place of. These games, some of them are truly realistic, others are pseudo-realistic, but still deal with the actual cybersecurity concepts in question. And you can find the games I'm going to show each have different techniques and different topics that they teach about during the process of playing. The game should follow, if you're choosing one, it should follow actual methods of attack, or again, be pseudo-realistic with clear explanations as to how they work and work with actual concepts. Some of the games that are currently out there and really usable for this purpose are HackMud. I've played this one myself. It's a text-based puzzle-solving hacking game that requires you solve various puzzles to get access to different systems to figure out the overarching story. And you can actually create your own server in that game as well that can then be defended against by other people. The one that I'm most impressed with that I've been playing on a regular basis is called 19.4. This is a game by a well-known company called Allison Smith. And one of the things that they do is they have, they create augmented reality games for various companies. Like Vampire the Masquerade had an ARG where people who solved it got an early beta for the game or got to see the opening cutscene before everybody else. But what it does, and I'll show you in the next slide, it does a lot of really cool stuff, but it's tied almost directly back to actual cybersecurity tools. There are 2 groups online that I'm really favorable of. These both have lists compiled that have suggestions for games and how to gamify various topics. The first is the culture of cybersecurity. This is designed for ages, their items are designed for ages 5 to 11. And I've got links for this and the others in my references slide. If you want to download my slide deck after, it is uploaded to the site and you can see the links there. The other one is help systems. These are designed for more advanced lessons. This is actually compiled by a cybersecurity company. And so this is designed for more advanced, I would say probably high school and above, maybe late middle school and above in terms of actually teaching direct cybersecurity concepts. So 19.4, and I'm not sponsored by the company. I'm working on some cool stuff from them, but I haven't heard back yet. But this is by, again, Allison Smith. And as you can see from some of the screenshots here, and I'm going to blow up a couple of these for you so that you can see them. The premise is you're a member of an international team of cybersecurity experts. And basically you go around trying to prevent massive cyber attacks or even in some cases outright warfare by attacking systems and defending your own. And when it gets into how it works, this is where the game really kind of shines. Each technique is given a section of the screen, especially when you're doing the academy sections, where they actually give links directly to abstracts of the real world tools being used, the theorized tools being used, and the overarching concept. So not only is it a very fun game, this one truly brings in a learning concept that you don't see in a lot of other games. There is even a multiplayer option similar to HackMud. You can build your own server and have others defend against it, and you earn points and modifications for doing so. It's fascinating in that not only does it use things like, let me pull one of the images up real quick and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. back over here. Download. Sorry guys, I forgot to have these actually up first. All right, here we go. So the one I'm going to show you now is what they call the phone backdoor. And so one of the things that it's teaching or shows, for instance, the MAC address of the phone, the maker of the phone. When you start your intrusion, it's more than just clicking a button and watching it go. You have to figure out the make and the model of the phone, what weaknesses are in it, and how to exploit them. And that's what you're seeing in the background. So it's actually doing a dump of, in this case, air dump. So it's pulling all the Wi-Fi in a building to get the cell phone itself and then pulling the information from there. Another example is X Key Store. This is using theorized mechanics to do basically pattern matching and pattern analysis between various topics or people. You choose a different kind of pattern analysis, how much server space you want to give to it, and let it run. Finally, one more example that they have is the Fox Asset Server. So from here, not only are you having to get what the group is running, so in this case, this VPN software has a web page running Apache 2.2 on port 80, and you have to determine first, what are you trying to do? Well, these guys are trying to put a rootkit on it. You have to determine how you're going to attack. Is there an SMTP exploit? So if there was, you could then use the exploit database in the background, and then select the different attack methods. Now it does run those automatically, but it's not something that, I mean, obviously they don't want you to create the program to do it, but you're still having to determine the methods and the items that you're trying to breach and how. So let me get back to my PowerPoint here. Sorry about that, guys. So this is an example of a truly multifaceted game that that could truly be used as a supplemental learning tool within your classroom that already exists. It's not very expensive. It's well worth it if you want to try it for yourself. And again, I may have some cool stuff later from that team. I'm just waiting to hear back.